Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you are. I'm Jim Bojo. Welcome to Going Critical. Welcome back, everybody. Here we are again, and it's episode 3. This time there's 6 of us, can you believe it? And we've been looking at possibly the most famous cryptid in the world today. We've been ferreting away all week trying to find some nice juicy tidbits for you to really get your nashes into. But before we kick off, we'll have a quick run around just to catch up, and we'll get straight on. So first at the table, Ponky. Hello, mate. How are you doing this week?
I'm good.
I'm pretty good, thank you. Have you been up to anything special this week you wanted to point out? I think you've got a video out, haven't you?
Yeah, I made a video and it caused a massive flame war. So if you want to flame some people, that's a place you could do it.
Yeah, sounds a lot of fun. Definitely, I'm going to get down there and have a look myself. How about as apostate? Hello, mate. How are you doing today?
Hello. Happy to be here. What's up, guys?
Hey, man. How's it going? So, have you been up to anything fun this week you want to tell the ladies and gentlemen about at home?
Nothing coming out this weekend, but I am doing research into my new series. It'll be coming up very soon.
All very exciting. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, Carissa Brock, hello. How are you doing? Is your microphone working?
It is working, and it actually sounds, I think, a little bit better.
Excellent stuff, because we've had, it does sound a lot better today, actually. So, how are you doing today? Sorry, hi.
I am doing okay. It's, I don't know. It's a weird day.
Hasn't it? Have you got anything special coming out in the near future or anything you wanted to mention this week? Seeing any cool new creators or something?
No, I do want to take a minute to plug the Discord chat for Radical that's happening. A Marvel girl mentioned us in her tweet, so I just kind of want to pay that back to her for and just say, hey, anybody who has Discord who's on Radical's Discord chat, go over there after this is over and have some fun.
Brilliant stuff. I think everyone can agree with that. Okay, lovely stuff. Anthony Bailey, hello, mate. How are you doing?
Hello, and I'm doing fine. Thank you very much.
Look at you. I mean, you're not cold, are you? Because this time of year up where you are seems to be a bit chilly. Is that Loch Ness I recognise behind you?
Oh, yes, that's Loch Ness. I'm sitting up here and enjoying the fresh weather.
Must be brisk.
Brisk.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
anything new coming out that you want to point out to people, or have you seen anything you want to chill quickly whilst you've got a chance?
No, I'm still making excuses.
I'm sort of in the same boat as well. Fair enough, mate. Robert Leger, how are you doing today, mate?
I am fantastic. I'm sorry, I was muted. I was trying to get to it. I'm fantastic. How are you?
Yeah, no, I'm brilliant, mate. How's your week been going? You been up to anything interesting?
Just working around, trying to get this put together and stay sane for football at the same time.
All right, no, fair enough. Well, look, finally, that leaves me. I'm Jim Bojo. I talk to people. I'm a bit like Anthony. I've been making excuses and not doing enough because I have been concentrating on this channel a little bit, to be fair. But yeah, otherwise, there will be Mr. Jimbles coming out in the next few days, though. So that's something to look forward to. Now, in a moment, I'm going to pass you on to Zapostate. He's going to give us our sort of once weekly foot grilling to correct our errant ways and make us feel a bit foolish with our weekly correction. But first, we're going to take a moment to point out a new creator in the community that's made us all sit up and take notice a little bit. Mr. Bailey, you're going to tell us a little bit about them whilst we prepare a video, I think. Anthony.
Well, yeah, I've noticed this new creator, and he goes by the name of Bubble Burster, and he's trying his hand at a little bit of debunking, but not exclusively flat Earth. He's spreading out to other areas like religion and anti-vax.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
He's got a really nice video of him helping a flat Earth friend fill out a resume. It's pretty good.
Nice. Oh, well, that's brilliant stuff. Well, look, if anyone watching hasn't heard of this guy, obviously we can recommend to get over there and have a look. We'll be putting all the links to our citations and stuff in the description after the show's over. So if you just wait a little bit after we're finished, it should be popping up pretty quickly. Now, let's see. I think Robert Leger's got a video of Bubble Burst he can actually play for us now. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. Here we go.
Fraudulent and retracted 1998 article that implied a possible link between vaccines and autism. But it was based upon a very small sample size of 12 children, and no actual science was used to corroborate the conclusions. If you are interested in how to shut down these dangerous science deniers in one fell swoop, just know it takes only a little bit of research. Anti-vaxxers believe personal anecdotes are golden evidence to justify their contrarian opinion. It's not. One might note that their child has autism after receiving a vaccination. However, diagnoses for autism and other neurological disorders are typically made in early childhood, around the same time as vaccinations are administered. Just because a child received a vaccination and soon after was diagnosed for some disorder doesn't mean the vaccine caused it. This specious logic is equivalent to saying that you tried a new food and later that day you had a headache because of it. There are other plausible explanations, such as maybe you just need more sleep. It takes chemical testing to link vaccines or drugs to any sort of condition, and whenever this has been tested, no link has been found.
Well, I think there we go. I think that's brilliant stuff. Now, as you can see, I think this is definitely worth something worth a look at. Our recommendation is definitely to get over there as soon as you're able. Give the guy a sub and go on to show some support. And actually, for that matter, for those who haven't already, consider giving us a little sub or a thumbs up if you're enjoying the show. It definitely lets us know that you're enjoying it. So if you also, that's one other thing someone said I should ask, go out and tell other people about the show. Apparently word of mouth quite a successful way, and frankly we would like to see new people who are interested in interesting subjects to join in. So any way you can think of getting the message out there, please feel free. Right, I think I'm done with my little bit of shameless self-promotion. So now I'm going to go over to Zapostate, who's going to give us a bit of a ticking off again. Mr. Zapostate, you've got some corrections for us. Is that right?
Absolutely, I do. I actually have a correction for myself. You see, I went all snarky last week and said, hey, none of these corrections are my fault. And then I immediately shoved my foot all the way to the metatarsals, way up in my mouth. So what I said was that writer George Sands coined the term the Bermuda Triangle in 1952. First off, his name was George Sand, not Sands. Secondly, David H. in the comment pointed out that the Bermuda Triangle was coined in 1964 by Vincent Gaddis. Gaddis's article is indeed the first known print usage of the term Bermuda Triangle, but in the same article he attributes the name to popular usage. So Gaddis himself claims not to have coined it, though he certainly popularized it. But the point of the matter is that what I said, that George Sand coined the phrase, that simply wasn't true. So,
brilliant stuff. Well, very much indeed. Again, you can consider us all suitably chastised. Again, look, we love the audience to point out when we're wrong, basically. So when you hear us say something foolish, wrong, or unsubstantiated, feel free to get in contact and we will try and correct ourselves week on week as we go through. Right, thank you ever so much as well to Zapostate for that one. Now, let's see. We are going to go over to Port Punky because he's prepared another special introduction to this week's topic. Mr. Port Punky, hello, sir.
Hello. Once again, I will put on my reading glasses.
Excellent.
Every time. Today's mysterious mystery is lurking in the depths of Loch Ness. The Loch Ness Monster, or as she's affectionately called, Nessie. Bobby, if you've got a map, I've put a map of the UK. If you could bring that up.
Yes, I'm working on it.
No, okay. So I've got a map of where the United Kingdom is, because I know not everyone is best friends with geography. It's one of these. So there's the United Kingdom somewhere. The northern country is called Scotland. That's it. There we go. So that's where we are. North part is Scotland. And if you go to the previous one, there's a map of Scotland with Loch Ness highlighted. There we go. That's Loch Ness, right at the top. Loch is the Scottish word for lake. This loch is about 37 kilometers long, 2.7 kilometers wide at its widest point, and up to 230 meters deep. So that's a huge amount of fresh water. Since ancient times, there are records of a sea monster of some variety lurking in the loch. The legend became popular in the 1930s with the advent of amateur photography, video recording, and eventually the information age. There are hundreds of photos, videos, and eyewitness accounts of unexplainable waves, animated objects, or something swimming in the deep water. The truth is, as usual, elusive, as there is no smoking gun. No clear photo has ever been taken, no carcass has been found. However, the waters are extremely deep, expansive, and murky, and anything could be hiding there. Today's topic is, does Nessie exist?
Thank you very much indeed, Port Ponky. Okay, well, look, I suppose it's a simple enough question, really. There's a few ways we can look at it, but I'm going to start with the very basics. I'm going to find out, how long have you guys even known about Nessie? When was the first time you heard about her? Because obviously for me, I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. It's been part of the culture of this country for so long. It's just one of those myths that you sort of grow up with. Port Ponky, you are, a Scot. Perhaps you'd be willing to answer that one first.
I have no idea when I first learned about Nessie. It's part of the zeitgeist here. Everyone knows that Nessie is 100% real.
Absolutely. Probably the same in America, because it's quite a popular myth over there as well. Anthony, what about you? When did you first hear about Nessie?
Oh, God. I think when I was a kid.
Right.
So
one of those old
40 years ago.
Wow. I mean, it's an old story as far as I can tell. It doesn't go back quite as far as some of the myths. What about you, Zaposte? Is this another thing you've just grown up knowing about it?
Yeah, definitely. Especially, I don't know about the UK, but here in America during the 90s, when I was in childhood, there was, a lot of stuff like the rise of alien abductions and cryptids and everything. So Nessie was just thrown in with Bigfoot and the Jersey Devil and all these other cryptids that you constantly hear about. So yeah, I've been listening to that my whole life, basically.
Yeah, it's such a common one. I suppose the same for you as well, Robert.
Yeah. We're big into Bigfoot and other stuff like that here, and the Loch Ness Monster is one I heard when I was very young. I don't know how old I was, but I've been hearing that my whole life, just like Zaposte and the rest of you guys, really.
Now, it looks to me like Carissa's had to drop out for a moment. She's got sort of various family emergencies at the moment, and she's very kindly agreed to try and join us on the show anyway, which is a step. Oh, I think I can't hear myself, but hopefully you can still hear me. I've just managed to yank a wire out. Anyway, basically, Carissa's currently coming in and out, so hopefully when she pops back in, I'll be able to talk to her. The very first question I've got for people is about the history of the arrangement. Okay, who'd like to jump in and mention where they think the first sort of stories about Loch Ness first came from? Port Ponky, how about you?
So prior to the popularization in the 1930s, the oldest one was a sort of Christian fellow called Saint Columba. Assuming he wasn't a saint when he was alive. That's posthumous. I believe we have a photograph of Saint Columba, who was up at Loch Ness for some reason, and saw a sea creature bothering someone. So he used the power of Jesus to make the sea creature go away. Definitely a true story. And that was in the 6th century.
Yeah, that's a real one. Did you notice, by the way, with that one, that was written into the annals of, it's basically not the memoirs, it was the autobiography of a person written 100 years after their life, or after their birth, so well after the point where they died, and certainly at a point where they were trying to get that individual sanctified. So there is a certain questioning as to the legitimacy of the story, just how exciting it really was. Perhaps it was amped up a bit to give it that sort of miracle status, if you see what I mean.
That was a legitimate photo.
Yeah. You know what? I changed my mind. You convinced me. So this was, I'm trying to remember, it was the 6th century AD, right? Something like, was it 547 or was it 647? I can't quite.
565.
There you go, that sort of region, which is an extraordinarily long time ago. What about the next sort of reports? Because my findings show that it was quite a few hundred years.
Someone else want to take this? Because, I mean, I could just talk about this all day.
What about you? You must have sort of taken note of a few of the different sightings. What's your timeline look like for these things?
Yeah, I do see a big jump. It's sort of a thing that it seems like that 565 of St. Columba kind of started it all off, but up and down the River Ness and into Loch Ness itself, there was sort of just rumors of just a generic sort of sea monster going on in through there. Like you mentioned before, though, the real correctly, or not correctly, but recorded stuff really starts in and around the 1930s or so.
Absolutely. Also, now someone might want to jump in and correct me here, but I think I have a minor correction. Is it the River Ness or is it the River Loch? I think it connects to the sea on the Loch on one side, and then it connects to a section of the. Oh, it's a canal of some description. I've forgotten the name now. How embarrassing! But Punky, did you write that down, or how about you, Tony? Anyone?
I think the canal's near Inverness.
That's
I
right.
think there is a River Ness. I don't know. It's all just miserable, like hills. And if you've never been to Scotland,
notes, so.
you've never been to Scotland, it's miserable and freezing, and it's cold, and there's wet stuff everywhere. So I've never been there personally, but I think there's a river out to Inverness to the.
Yeah, River Ness, about 6 miles long, flows out of the northern end of Loch Ness in Scotland.
Oh, okay, my mistake. Well, absolutely. Obviously, my research was incomplete. What I've got is the Loch at one end, and then a section of some canal or other. Which, here we go. Yes, the other end is the Caledonian Canal to Loch. So I've obviously missed something somewhere. Actually, while we're on the subject, Poor Punky, you gave us a little bit of information, but I thought maybe we could look just a little bit more at the nature of the lake itself. I know that the northeastern corner of it basically starts at Inverness, and it stretches almost due southwest away from that. It's sort of very long and narrow. Anthony, what have you found out, mate?
Well, for such a lake, it's pretty deep, 700 and some odd feet.
Wow.
And because of its narrowness, it has strange currents.
Okay.
And the steepness of all, it was a glacier lake. So to speak. Was dug out from the glaciers during the last ice age, or actually a couple of ice ages.
Okay.
And that's why it's so deep and so steep.
But wait, so you're saying that the lake basically appeared as a result of the shrinking back of the ice from the ice age, right? Is that something because that's something that rings a bell with me throughout my research as well.
Well, yes, okay. Originally it was formed as the tectonic plates shoved together and created that mountain range there, which half of it now is you can find in the north coast of America, and another part here in Scotland, and another small part up in Sweden. Anyway, as the two continental shelves shoved together, they created these hard mountains, and then as the continents separated again, and the ice age came, it filled in this crease with water.
Okay. Look at that. Now, see, because it's interesting though, because Loch Ness sometimes is purported to be some kind of large reptile, possibly a plesiosaur, something very, very ancient indeed. But it would seem that if the lake is not old enough to permit that, then that would sort of help close off one avenue almost immediately. Perhaps we'll get into that a little bit later. Anyone else got any sort of details about the nature of the lake, say the water or the wildlife in it? Prostate, how about you?
Yeah, I sure do. I found something kind of fun about Loch Ness. I think because of its depth, it's one of the few freshwater lakes that experiences what's called thermocline, which is a clear layer of water where the warmer water above and the colder water below don't necessarily mix. They kind of go in and around each other, creating these really massive underwater waves, which may explain some of the surface type currents and seiches and things that strange wakes, they call them.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Oh, that's fascinating. Because one of the phenomena that's reported are these sort of what people describe as the humped back of the creature, but obviously could easily be some sort of formation of wave, possibly, or at least that's one of the ideas that's been cited. Ponky, what about you? Do you find anything out about the wildlife in the lake in general?
I did a bit of reading on this. So this lake, it's a loch. This loch is deep, so you can see behind Anthony. It looks fairly nice and flat, but when you get out onto that loch, it's just like a cliff underneath, right? It's about the height of the London Shard or something, straight down, which prevents a lot of now is it algae or plankton or both? It prevents a lot of plankton appearing, basically, because there's not much surface land, like under the water shoreline land.
Yeah.
So that's what I read. You're going to get things like seals, otters, probably some freshwater fish. You're going to get deer, pheasants, just the regular Scottish stuff. Miserable animals.
Well, I don't know. You've got brilliant stags up there. They're a great animal. But yeah, I see.
Yeah.
I sort of found similar stuff as well, which is more or less that the. Oh, it looks like my camera's failed. Let's see if I can repair that in a moment. Hello, I should be back. Okay, yeah.
Probably
So
the wire you pulled out.
yeah, quite possibly. Sorry about that. So yeah, as you say, we've got very steep sides to this, and it's very, very deep. And obviously, a lot of the life that happens in lakes happens in that boundary layer where there's still plenty of sunlight. It's not just the fact that it's steep-sided and the light dips off quickly, but coupled to that, the surrounding area is heavily peated, and that soaks into the water, and it's got an extraordinarily high peat content, right? It's like well beyond what you would normally expect. It keeps the temperatures of the lake much colder. It, as you say, it produces an inability for plankton to properly form, which makes the food web much more narrow. And the total tonnage of fish in the lake that I've managed to find sort of reliable figures for state that it's somewhere in the region to 25 tons total of fish in there. Now that doesn't include certain flora. It doesn't include the seals necessarily, which come in and out, but it does include the eels, for instance, which are a common feature and might come up a little bit later. Now we had to look at the nature of the lake itself. I think it's possibly time we start looking into some of these claims. We started off a rather fantastical one from St. Columba, I think it was. But perhaps if we go towards where things really started to kick off in the 1930s. Robert Leger, do you remember any of the stuff that we were sort of talking about earlier in terms of when first things popped up? I mean, so far, what are you thinking of the stuff you've seen?
I don't remember any of the specifics about when things started happening. I just know that this is eerily similar to any other missing animal that we're claiming people have seen and haven't. I'd like to comment more on the claims, like you said. I'm not sure about the history.
Okay, well, no, that's fair enough then. Actually, it's just occurred to me that I don't know if Carissa Brock's back with us, but it looks like she is. How are you doing, Carissa?
I'm doing okay.
Fantastic.
One of the things I wanted to say real quick is on the depth of Loch Ness, I watched, I think it was the Naked Science one, where they said they actually gone out and sonar, and there's bits of it that they've registered as being upwards of 812 feet. And There's only about 9 to 10 feet before clarity is lost, and you can't see anything below that.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
I have a photo up of them imaging the bottom.
Oh, that's the deep scan, wasn't it? Oh, well, actually, yeah, I think we'll probably get onto that one fairly soon. I'll tell you what, though, let's look at the first sort of claims. Now, Port Ponky, I think you know the Spicer report, which is often credited to be the one that fired off the big revival in the 30s, right?
It was it's 1933. That's the year where everything got exciting. In terms of Loch Ness. Spicer, some dude, claimed he saw a big old monster whilst he was driving his car. He's driving his car. This big thing came out in front of him on the road, walked across the road, and then buggered off. So There's no
Indeed.
photos or anything. He just told everyone he saw this, which back then was pretty good.
Yeah. Now he sent a newspaper article, didn't he? I think we've actually got that on the list somewhere. Bobby, it's God knows what the name's going to be, but it's the very tall, thin image, which is of an old-fashioned newspaper report.
I got it here.
It's, of course, back then it was sort of surprising that what you could actually do was from a single newspaper report. There it is. It was entirely possible to start this sort of worldwide craze. It's pretty surprising, really, but it's a story that captures the imagination, even if it is quite wild. It's obviously got nothing in it that really corroborates, but there's a few nice details. He claims that, you know, if it had feet, they were of the webbed kind, for surely you couldn't see them, and it had something in its mouth. It was some sort of lamb it was claimed it was carrying. And it's a very vivid description. It says it was like some sort of ancient reptile or dragon, but it does rather seem extraordinarily detailed to me to a certain extent, and it's rather surprising that rather than report the animal in some other way, the first idea this gentleman had was to go straight to a newspaper. I don't know, Anthony Bailey, what do you think? Have you had a look at the Spicer report?
Spicer, yeah.
There you are. Hey, buddy.
I can hardly read that either.
Fair enough.
That's pretty bad. Let me put on my glasses.
Oh, well, don't worry about it for now. Like, I'm just wondering who's got some other sort of reports, because there are God knows how many of these things. A couple of the places that I looked, there were something on the order of 300 reports for me to look through, which just covered a single decade. So there's a fantastic amount out there. I wonder if anyone's got any interesting ones. Poor Punky, what about you?
I can.
If I had a buzzer, I'd be hitting it constantly. So it's like you said, 1933. The next big one, Hugh Gray. I think we have the Hugh Gray photograph somewhere in the drive, Bobby. I believe it's called Hugh Gray photograph.
Working on it.
This guy actually took a photo, but as you can see, the photo is really terrible because he used a camera from 1933. That's it. Now, I read that it looks a bit like a dog, and I didn't see it at first. But then I kind of saw it.
I see the dog's face.
Yeah, I went and found a picture of a dog, so we also have that. I'm not saying it was a dog, but
I don't see a body or anything, but if you look right toward the center of it, where the big black smudge is, that's the dog's nose, and you can see like two eyes up in the middle of the screen, and it looks like a flappy ear. But as for the ridge there, I'm not sure what we're looking at.
Could it be carrying a stick? So I put an image up of a dog as well because that's something to look at. But that's just an idea of what it could be. It could also be an eel. It could be a wave. I don't know. You can't really tell much from this photograph because it kind of sucks.
Well, absolutely. It is unfortunately something that we've suffered a lot with the research for this program, is in trying to find really good footage and images. What we've actually found is an endless succession of grainy, black and white, and difficult to see pictures. Honestly, for me, until you pointed out there was supposed to be a dog sort of in there, all I could see was wreckage. It looked like aircraft wreckage, just some random piece of twisted metal floating in the water. I've got no concept of why anyone thinks that looks like Nessie. Which part looks like an animal? It's got straight lines on it. Nature doesn't do straight lines very often. It's very bizarre. Now look, what else have we got in our little list of pictures? Because we've got such a huge library. I think maybe we should consider just trying to go through them a bit by bit, and we'll sort of talk about what they are. That way it's a bit easier to find them instead of ferreting them all out. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Lovely. All right. Well, you tell us when you're up to the top. Then we can
That was the dog. I saw the doggy.
Hey,
Yeah, there we go. Look at that.
Yeah.
I could have found one with a bigger stick, but you can see.
Oh, no,
I've seen that other picture before, but now I don't know if it's the pareidolia kicking in, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm like. That looks like a golden retriever with a stick.
Yeah, that's the problem. Once you're primed to see that, that will be what you see.
Once you said dog, that's all I could see.
Maybe I tainted the well by saying that.
Hey.
I apologize.
This is the problem: is as soon as you get it get the idea in your head to start looking for a specific thing in an image, of course your brain is going to work very hard to try and see that thing for you. It's the rather unfortunate problem about our evolutionary processes. We do it naturally, and sometimes it confuses us. Now look, this is our top picture, right, on the top right hand here, which is what we identified. This is the deep scan. As apostate, do you remember anything about the deep scan? This was quite a big mission in the 80s, wasn't it? I think 87 was the last one.
The deep scan, was this up? No, it wasn't Operation Bootstrap, right? I know, yeah. In the 80s is when they started bringing in a lot of the sonar. That's what it is. Yeah, it's the ship of sonar teams. Like you said, because the Loch is so peaty and distance is like less than 20 feet as far as visibility when you go down. They got a bunch of boats together and did a massive underwater sonar scan and came up with I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a couple interesting little finds that, possibilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw that. Well, there was one thing that confused them quite a lot. In the end, I think they narrowed it down to being some sort of wreckage, essentially an upturned and sunken boat. But the readings they were getting back from sonar were eerily like the shape of the Loch Ness Monster supposedly was. Let's see, Anthony Bailey, do you remember anything about the deep scan missions? Because the chap in charge, whose name now escapes me, unfortunately, was a little bit epic. He was kind of a hero, really. His whenever you spoke to him about it, he was very careful not to say that he either did or didn't believe, much rather that he was just very keen to try and find out. And consequently, he did approach the problem rather than assuming it was there and to find, but he tried to sort of take a scientific approach. I sort of respect that a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, that's right. He never verified or denied the existence of. He knows he's seen some strange stuff, but he also attributed that to schools of fish, because when they group together, they can appear to be a large mass in sonar scans. Maybe you know that. I believe his name was Daryl Lawrence.
Oh, yeah. Yes, do you know what? I think you might be right.
Yeah, and other ships out there, or boats out there, have come up with interesting sonar scans that also made them think that it was Nessie under them, but they couldn't really see anything because of the murkiness of the water. And A2, the Loch is wet.
Oh, okay, excellent, important news, lovely stuff. Okay, Mr. Leger, would you mind moving the picture on one? We've seen the dog already, so it might be the one after that. In fact, I think. Right, now, this is an eel. Poor Ponky, perhaps you'd care to tell us why this is a significant picture?
Because eels live there, and it looks a bit like what people say the monster is like.
Concise as ever. That is actually...
Basically, that's the issue. You got things that look like this living there. How do you differentiate what you see? How do you discount it being an eel?
Indeed. The thing is, people have saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous. There's obviously different. Nessie's enormous, and these eels are small." And well, there are a couple of problems there as well, right?
All the photos of Nessie, very few of them have a clear sense of scale. This might be a good segue to go to the most famous photo of Nessie, the surgeon's photo.
Oh yeah, quite possibly. Bobby, if you start scrolling through to the surgeon's photo, that's the one where it's sticking its head right up out of the water in black and white.
If I remember, we have two of them. I'll start at the first one and we can cycle through both of them.
Yeah, so this photo was taken in 1934, back in the day. Not that one. Keep going.
Not that one.
By a surgeon.
Next time.
It was published in the Daily Mail, which is a fantastic source of journalistic integrity. That's the one. There we go. Look at that.
Yeah. Look at that beautiful image.
So when you look at this is the most famous photo of Nessie. What sort of size is this thing? It's not that easy to tell.
No, there's no context.
Right.
So this is the published one. If you go back, here's the full photo, or what remains of the full photo. When you see that, it doesn't look that big. Well, again, it's still not the easiest to tell. Anyway, this photo has a long and interesting story. Unless you interrupt me, I will keep going.
No, I was going to say, why don't you start us off on it? Because at this, at various points, we'll obviously interject, but you are particularly well versed on this one, so you're just the man for the job.
So this photo, the chat the chat know what's up. Is it fake? Yes, probably is. But the story begins a bit earlier.
Can you hear me? Sorry, mate.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear everybody.
It's me. I'm just trying to cut over the top of you. I'm terribly sorry. It just occurs to me we haven't actually gone to anyone in the chat yet, and I'm wondering whether or not we could get Carissa Brock in and tell us if there are any questions or comments just yet before we steamroll her on.
I do have a couple. The one that stuck out to me the most was "And the Conspiracy" talked about all cryptid. He said all cryptid pics are grainy. It's because of the shimmer all the cryptids produce. Not a joke. Actually heard that excuse. So apparently someone told him that the reason why all of the pictures are grainy is because they give off a shimmer effect like the vampires out of Twilight.
I think that's a Mitch Hedberg line. I think Bigfoot is blurry.
I love Mitch Hedberg, man.
Epic. All right, and did you say there was another comment there, or was that the last one?
That was and I wanted to correct myself too because AT2 Productions pointed out I said feet and it's supposed to be 812 meters, I think. So I got that wrong.
It's 800 feet.
It is feet. Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's not 800 meters. That's way too deep.
I write American when I write notes, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't get the wrong measurement.
Oh, it's fair enough. I think I got it. It's about 260 to 280 meters approximately, which is on the order of 750 to 800 feet. It depends. There have been various different measurements, obviously, but I think the deepest, as you said, was 810 feet, which is 270 something. Someone in the chat can definitely do the maths. Anyway, look, thank you very much for that. In which case, Port Punky, sorry for steamrolling all over. Turn it on. Okay.
Back to Port Punky's story time. So the story begins earlier. The Daily Mail, which to people who are not familiar with it, is kind of a trashy paper. I don't know what its reputation was like in the 1930s, but I doubt it was great.
Daily Mail. I seem to recall them thinking that Hitler was a jolly nice chap, and it's part of their history since.
Yeah. So they want some scoop on the Loch Ness monster, and they hired a guy called Marmaduke Witherell, which I have a picture of because he has quite a mug.
I love this guy.
Now, this guy was a kind of explorer, game hunter type, the perfect person to track down Loch Ness monster. And he went out and he found some footprints.
Extraordinary.
I also have photos of a sketch of the footprints that he found. The Daily Mail published this big scoop. Wow, we got Loch Ness monster's footprints. Fantastic. The footprints were analyzed by, I'm going to say, a museum because I forgot who. And they said, these are hippopotamus footprints.
Yeah.
So that's not great for his credibility. He also owned a hippopotamus foot ashtray.
Is that the picture that we've got? I was wondering what.
We have the picture. Bobby, if you could bring that up.
That is so amazing. So this is your classic English adventurer chap here from the Victorian sort of era. He's got the proper hat, turns up in a foreign country and says, "What's this place called?" And they sort of go, "Oh, this is Mumbai. Oh, Bombay, very nice. It's mine now. I'm moving in. I'm going to shoot all the elephants." Right. So he is the perfect chap to hunt big game like this. It just is rather unfortunate that he decided to take the cheaty route. Bobby, did we manage to find that picture at all?
Which one are we looking for again, man?
It's the hippopotamus foot ashtray.
Yes, I'll get it.
Beautiful stuff. So yeah, it rather destroyed his credibility. It seems then it was quite clear that he had done a little bit of a hoax.
Yep. Shall I
He
just
didn't
keep
give up
going?
though.
Go on, Apostate, you got this.
Yeah, he didn't give up from there. I love this hippopotamus.
Brilliant.
That's fantastic.
It's ridiculous.
So,
Jeez.
yeah, I don't mean to step on your poor pony, but I love this story too. So he didn't give up. He teamed up, I believe, with his son. Was his name Ian Wetherill? And they put together a nice little model using a toy submarine that winds up and a bit of wood putty to look like our famous Loch Ness monster.
No way. That's amazing.
And they actually almost got the surgeon photo comes in between all this, so maybe I'll let poor Ponky go on with that. But I think they had to sink this particular model at one point because they almost got caught by a, what do they call it, a water bailiff?
Oh, really?
That's fun. They just sink it with their foot.
That's classic. I mean, honestly, the history of hoaxes of Loch Ness is more interesting than the history of the search for it in many ways, because there have been so many different people who've tried in lots of different ways. I mean, it's questionable whether or not Mr. and Mrs. McKay's initial report back in 1933 and so on were even legitimate to start with. Now, Port Punky, you were telling us a little bit about the story. Why don't you carry on where you were?
Oh, well, as Apostate says, Witherall and his conspirators faked up this photo with a toy submarine, as a confession that came much later reveals. And he knew he couldn't sell the photos because his reputation was not great, both because he's a massive fake and he owns a disgusting hippopotamus ashtray. Ugh. So instead, via a friend of a friend, he passed it along from a surgeon, because back then, if you were a surgeon, and I guess nowadays, if you're a surgeon, you're a person of good reputation.
Indeed, someone to be trusted, a pillar of the community. Hence
why the photo is called the surgeon's photo. Now, it's a bit weird because it's just asked which surgeon. It's supposedly a guy called Robert Wilson, who's a gynecologist. But that's supposedly. It's taken by a surgeon, so it must be good, kind of thing. Yeah, it got published, and it was the rage for years and years.
Yeah, I mean, it was still being cited when I was a kid on TV shows, like in the 90s. You could still see, no one's even entirely sure. It was claimed that it was debunked, but that's sort of rather lame excuse where we know. I forget if he admitted it himself, the person who did it, or do we know who did it? I think you said that we're not actually sure who this surgeon supposedly is, but the way that the trick was done became quite clear, right? Which was that he had essentially put the head of a dinosaur, a toy dinosaur, onto a toy submarine, floated it out and taken a picture. Is that right?
Yeah, they know what kind of submarine it was. It was a toy submarine from Woolworths or something, when that was still a store. Modeling clay. The guy who made it was his nephew, I think. I don't know who confessed it. It was in the 70s, I think, that it was confessed. I couldn't actually track down the original sort of confession, because you don't want to just say, hey, it's being confessed, therefore it's fake, because I feel you should read the actual confession, and I didn't, so maybe it's real.
Well, yes, of course. I think you're duty bound to say that, of course, though, because you don't get a Scottish passport unless you affirm that you believe in Nessie, right? That's the rules of citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, I don't just have Nessie on my head for the show. That's just like because it's Sunday.
Well, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, it's real Nessie. Check it out.
Oh, I see what you mean. I barely even noticed it.
Oh, thanks, guys. Jeez.
Well, it just fits.
Just messing.
Bailey, hello, mate. How are you doing? I haven't asked you in a little while. What do you think about the surgeon's photo then? You must have seen this by now. Any other great hoaxes that you'd like to point out that you've seen?
Other great hoax. Well, there was this couple guys. They did put hay bales together and put a tarp over it and kind of drug it through the loch and said, "Oh, look, Nessie, Nessie." And that was pretty stupid.
It's quite impressive. It's amazing how you can do these things so quickly, though. It reminds me of those guys who made the crop circles using a plank and a bit of string each. It's that sort of. It's amazing the effect you can get with a blurry camera and a bit of distance and just sort of nondescript green brown material, right?
Right.
Robert, do you know a good sort of hoax? Oh, sorry, who did I cut across there? Was that you, Tony? No, he's gone quiet. Fair enough. Robert Leger, do you know any of the sort of the good hoaxes? What have you read a bit about, sort of either sightings or things that are sort of famously faked?
Guys, I don't know anything about any official happenings. All I know, only my experience with it is just people talking about it here. Does it exist? Does it not exist? I don't know any like specific fakings or anything like that. It's never come up in that fashion. I wanted to watch a documentary on it, but I never got around to it today, and that's my fault. I apologize, but I have no formal knowledge of this topic.
Fair enough. Well, look, there's one more. There's a couple of little pictures I'd quite like to bring up while we're on the subject of fakery, because I wanted to have a bit of an experiment at this myself, and I've done 2 pictures. We've called them Jimbo Joe's surgeon photos. So, Bobby, do you reckon you could try and load up those for me? I want the smudged black and white looking one first.
I got you.
Fantastic.
This should be right here.
This was nothing more than a basic experiment in resolution and very basic photo editing. There it is. No, the other one. Go back one. So this is my Loch Ness. Okay. As you can see, you can't see anything in the sort of the background. It's very difficult to tell the scale. You can't be sure exactly how big the waves are. And it'd be very easy for me to give this to an enthusiast and say, look what I found. Look at this. Isn't that amazing? Now, if we go back to the original photo, Bobby, you'll see it's a stick. So all you have to do is get a stick that is approximately the right sort of shape, something that's going to float and is just unevenly weighted enough to have one side sticking up, and then get a good distance away, make sure there's no sort of border visible in the background, and your heart's content, and just reduce the resolution and make it all look old-timey with a bit of grain and stuff. It is remarkably easy to fake these things in what I think was quite a convincing way. Now, having said that, there are a lot of different propositions for evidence for why Loch Ness may not be such a mad idea. There have been constant scientific searches. There was even one done this very year. In August, the scientific team said it was still just plausible that something like Nessie could exist. And by September, when they published their results, they basically said, no, it doesn't. We've looked at it, But there is still enough popularity in the idea that people can find ways to possibly explain it. So let's turn to Zapostate. Why don't you give us one or two of the good explanations for what may be going on and how they could still be in the lake after all this time? What is Nessie? How did it get there? How did it survive it?
Yeah, and I'll bring up that same study that you mentioned. An interesting thing that was sort of thrown around for a long time was maybe the existence of a very large sturgeon, being that these sturgeon can reach massive sizes, and especially if they have enough food sources. But that DNA test this year showed absolutely no sturgeon DNA in the loch. What it did show was, and we brought this up earlier, was a very large amount of eel DNA. And it has been reported sometimes that eels can get up to sometimes almost 5 feet. What's that? 1.5 meters. Sorry. So from a distance, or when your view is obscured, even something that small, if it's surfacing and rippling along like an eel might, hey, that might be an explanation of a sighting.
Absolutely. Now, I think I'm also right that eels will travel in little groups of 2 or 3. Speaking in a line as well, which means that viewed from a shallow angle at a distance, because they travel quite near the surface, several of these things can give the impression of being one much larger thing. Part of the nature of the loch is that when it is particularly flat, because you've lost this sense of perspective, you can't see whether you've got 2 things stacked behind one another or just one slightly larger thing. It all gets completely lost. Poor Ponky, what do you think? Have you got any more bits of evidence for why it may be there? What is it supposedly that's there?
I could keep going. I got a lot more. Why don't we go into some of the films? Because it's not just photographs. We've seen a bunch of terrible photographs that I don't think would convince anyone. But there's also real life films of this.
Indeed. Well, that being the case.
We've got two ready on the drive. There's the Dinsdale film, which is the earlier one, and David
Which one?
Elder. The Dinsdale film, the black and white one.
All right, you ready to go?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's
Here we
got
go.
audio. Can we talk over it?
Hold on. I don't know if I. 1 second.
Hold
Hold on a second. Give me one moment
Oh,
to add the
Oh.
microphones.
We need
I-
that music. We need that special elevator music for when we've got to ladies and gentlemen, please hold the line while we sort out our technical difficulties. Do you know? Is it the theme? I forget which song it is. Played on a organ or a theremin, Brilliant. One of us can croon over the top. It'll be fine. What do you reckon? You got it? You got it there, Bobby?
I am ready.
Lovely. All right, let's play, and then Port Ponky, just please feel free to narrate away.
All right, here we go.
So this is a footage taken by a guy called Dinsdale in 1960. I can't remember his first name. It might be David. Let me check. No, it's Tim. Okay.
Close.
Yeah. Is it a boat? Probably. Look, there's a bird. Yeah. It's better than a photograph. It's like a lot of terrible photographs, one after the other.
It is absolutely.
Are you all now convinced that Nessie is real now that you've seen this?
I can't refute it.
No question.
To be
Yeah, I
right.
mean, this is a boat.
Right. Look at the wake on that thing. It's got a churn directly where you would expect the propeller to be leaving sort of turbulent flow, and it's got that very, very distinctive wake, which is, I'm pretty sure, a bow wake and not a stern wake. Although, Bobby, you were at sea, perhaps you can improve my knowledge on this. Does that look like a boat to you? That particularly, this shot here, where it's got a very obvious V-shaped wake.
It does look like a boat. That would be the reasonable conclusion, not an animal. And the wake behind it is very long, so it was definitely a big disturbance of the water. Just judging off of that alone, and then the turn there, you can see that the wake obviously curves with it uniformly.
Oh.
I would say this is a boat. Yes.
I know what you mean. I mean, okay, again, what we're all doing is we're playing armchair video expert here a little bit, but there's certain bits of experience we've all picked up along the way, patterns that we recognize that don't make sense to something being under the water, for instance. Like that particular shot that we keep seeing at the beginning is so reminiscent of a boat. It's frightening, really. It's got such a clear wake. What about the other footage that we've got? Port Ponky, what's that one?
The other footage is finally Nessie in color. This is taken by a guy called David. Hey, he's actually called David this time. David Elder in 2013. And he took that as a tourist from the side of the Loch. Here we go, Loch Ness, Scotland.
Look at that
There's
production value.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So there you go.
This something moving in the water on Loch Ness. No idea what it is.
Okay, can they hear this audio? I think that's all he says. Yeah, you can see. Now I am not a zoologist or
under the water.
biologist or anything, but that's a wave, isn't it?
Go on, look.
I'm gonna say wave. I'm in the wave camp.
Yeah, I mean, that is
Does
just a
it
wave,
move
right?
quite a bit up?
wave come up earlier. I seem to recall now, I think it was the phosphate you were talking about. Due to the nature of the deep side, you get two sort of layers of water temperature which don't interact and produce very strong sort of current paths and waves. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's underwater waves, again, created by those two different temperatures of water having a clear air line. And that sometimes can reach the surface in a phenomenon that's known as a seiche. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And that is a wave that is on a different wave frequency than a wind-driven wave. And it sort of moves from one end of the very long loch to the other and can create these sort of, out of nowhere looking waves that don't seem to run against what the wind is doing. But that, to me, looks like something along those lines, like a seiche.
Well, this is it. This is why I wanted to bring it up. I know that you did a little bit of research on the matter, and obviously it's quite an interesting phenomenon. It's a little bit like, for instance, I don't know if you've ever taken a sort of a glass of water and you swirled it round and you get that sort of tornado effect going in, and you'll notice that it's never completely perfect. It always sort of moves around slightly unequally because of the nature of the flow within the water. You can almost imagine that sort of current moving through the water. You've got two things sliding past one another, which then cause a sort of a spiral flow, which is in one spot. And though the general pattern of the waves moving around, you can be in line with the wind, you get these odd eddies, which produce a sort of a surface wave that is reminiscent of, well, the humps of some sort of great seaborne creature. Like, and no one's actually said the word plesiosaur yet, by the way, but that tends to be one of the most common claims for what they think it is, an ancient prehistoric was it a dinosaur? There's a very specific classification for dinosaur that I can never quite remember. It was certainly waterborne. I'm not sure if it was a reptile. Anthony Bailey, can you correct me on that? Was a plesiosaur a dinosaur, a seaborne dinosaur? I forget.
A plesiosaur, yes, it was a seaborne dinosaur. I think, of course, it needed air to breathe and not water. So that means it would have to surface a hell of a lot more often. That means sightings would be, hourly and not yearly or decade.
Now, I think it's fair to say that the original, the Spicer, I think it was George Spicer who had the report in the Inverness Courier. He'd said that he'd seen a creature which had a long serpentine neck like a country road and had like an arched back, and you couldn't see its feet because they were sort of flippered-like, or they were of the web kind, and it had quite a short tail, and it was about 4 feet high. So that actually does sort of broadly match the description of plesiosaur, which has got a very long neck, quite a short tail by comparison, 4 big flippers, and a kind of a dual humped back. Now that's fine up to a point, but you've got to ask, how on earth did a creature like that ever get into the lake, right? Now, it seems as if it couldn't have been living there ever since the period of the dinosaurs because of the nature of how the lake was formed, right? We were talking earlier about how the glaciers sort of pulled back, and likewise there's no way for an animal like that to get in and out that we know of unless there was some kind of underwater like cavern or river. That again has a problem though, because the whole lake is elevated above sea level by about 16 meters, so that would make it incredibly difficult. Now, quite apart
from it's freshwater, and so it's not connected to the sea.
Is it not? Does it not eventually reach the sea?
Well, water goes out to the sea, yeah, but the lake is freshwater. If it had an undersea connection to the sea, an underground connection to the sea, wouldn't the whole thing be salty? That's a guess.
I'm not necessarily sure.
Oh, because it's high up, so the water would only pour out?
Hey.
I don't know.
Like, essentially, you'd expect that the underwater current to flow towards the sea and to remain broadly fresh until it gets to the brackish water at the delta, I think. Carissa, you sounded like you cut in there. Sorry.
No, I was just going to, I was going to say something and then my brain decided to delete what I was going to say, but I do have some comments. Turquoise Laura said something that was absolutely hilarious. She said, maybe Loch Ness is where NASA films the insides of the ISS and Nessie's neck is the porthole, or maybe it's the real Area 51. And the conspiracy said that he had read Nessie travels down the canal from the ocean to the loch for breeding and then travels back to the ocean. He said he remembers reading that somewhere, and I actually remember that too. I remember seeing a documentary a long time ago about it on the History Channel, of course. And they had talked about there being an underwater canal where animals could get through. I don't know if that's real or not. But also, there was one other thing. Why can't my brain work today? There was something else that you guys had mentioned about.
Was it about the?
The plesiosaur, in one of those documentaries that we watched a lot of the same ones, and he had talked about how not only was there not enough food, but in order for there to be a comparable size, like continuous, well, not for lack of a better word, source of plesiosaurs. You had to have anywhere between 35 and 40 plesiosaurs, and with them having to come up to the surface, every 2 hours or so, you would see upwards of 6 to 8 Nessies at one time.
Yeah, like constantly, especially if they were traveling in groups. Yeah, actually, there's some great numbers on this stuff, because if you sort of look at average or what a suggested average plesiosaur sizes are, their weight, their food consumption, things like that, the total fish stock of the lake is about 20 to 25 tons at any one time. And if you have 35 to 40 plesiosaurs who are eating upwards of 100 kilograms of fish a day, then actually the entire lake runs out of food in about 6 days. If you've got 40 of them eating, even if you only have one, realistically, even with sort of stocking yearly, it's going to take 6 months for it to use up the food supply. It's essentially an impossibility. It would have to visit the lake for some arbitrary reason and then have freedom to get back out to the sea, which does lead you to wonder why the hell it would even go to the loch in the first place.
Exactly.
Well, Plonky, what have you got to add at this point? I'm going to start at the top of the list and see where people are. Have you got any stuff you want to mention that we haven't got to so far?
So is this a kind of roundup?
We've still got a bit of time. We're just sort of having a report.
I don't know. We've seen a bunch of photos. We've seen some videos, and that's fine. I would like to discuss the more fundamental issues with having a sea monster, and why is she always unique? As Chris has said, for plesiosaurs you'd need 35 or 40 at a minimum. But that's true for anything. Even if Nessie's not a plesiosaur, you can't just have one Nessie. There's got to be a whole bunch of them to make more baby Nessies. That's a fundamental problem with the whole Nessie thing.
Well, except of course, there are historical reports of particular. Well, the large sturgeon keep coming up again and again, right? Which is that there are certain animals who live within the lake that could produce this. There is enough fish stock, for instance, for seals, right? And you can have quite large families of seals, which can use the canal, as I recall, to get to and from the sea. Actually, that's part of the way that they got up there in the first place. So the stories themselves have evolved from possibly real events. One of my favorites, for instance, is the story of an entire village who came out to the side of the loch with like sticks and stuff in order to thrash the monster, which they could see out in the water causing problems. And when they got there, they discovered it was a bathing horse. And so they all sort of quietly and embarrassedly went back about their business, really. So these things do happen. And a suitably large fish to fairly medieval people could be a hell of a tale, which over time just gets expanded beyond reason slightly.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't give that horse a thrashing. Going all out. It's freezing in Scotland. They're probably pretty annoyed.
I bet they were. Tony Bailey, then, what do you reckon so far? We've seen a few pictures, we've seen a bit of videos. Have you got any sort of questions about the whole arrangement that you want to bring up?
Well, we did mention earlier about the DNA study.
Oh, yeah.
They found different fish, but they found absolutely no reptile outside of frogs. Well, frogs are amphibian, but they found absolutely no reptile DNA in the loch. So plesiosaurus is out of the picture.
Yep, absolutely. What about you, Zapaste? What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, on the plesiosaur thing, one thing I noted too was that the people who study these sort of animals note that the spine structure of a plesiosaur would not actually allow it to have that big upright and out of the water sort of position that we see in a lot of these photos. It would be mostly straight, a little bit up, but it's physically impossible for the thing to actually do what people say it's going to do. And as far as in general, I mean, hell, it's folklore. You know, there's been stories about kelpies and all kinds of things in that area from Gaelic folklore going on for centuries. So, you know, a group of birds might look like something to you if you're far enough away.
Sure. Carissa, what about you? Same sort of idea? Have we got any comments as well that you want to point to?
I do have a couple more comments. Martin James said the humped back of the creature once turned out to be a load of tractor inner tubes and balancing weights strung together by Glasgow University students. They had everyone in a Nessie frenzy. So apparently that was one of the other issues that had come up, folks. And NANA said Nessie is as fake as Canadian bacon.
Ooh, low blow.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Shots fired.
I'm not gonna get it. I love you, Nene, but I'm not getting in on that one with you, brother.
Sacrilege.
I love bacon and I love my Canadian brothers. So
Look, it all comes from the same place, okay?
Well said. All right, well, look, we've had a look at all the various bits of details around. What I want to think about now is solutions to the problem. What do we really think is going on at Loch Ness from start to finish? I've got my own ideas, but I expect you have too. Port Ponky, you've been leading the chat a little bit on this one tonight. What are your conclusions about everything we've seen?
Well, obviously Ness is real. I'm obligated to say that by the Scottish Parliament.
all right.
Yeah. Jim, you said two things, both of which I think are very smart, and I'd like to bring up. One of them you said on this stream, if you're primed to see something, that's what you'll see.
Here's what you find.
Yeah, we said that about when I said it's a dog, and then Bobby could just see a dog. But the same applies. If you want to go to Loch Ness and see a monster, you stare at random stuff you can't make out long enough. Eventually, you'll see a monster. The other thing you said to me, not on the stream, but prior to it all kicked off in 1933. What else happened in 1933? A big cinematic experience, King Kong came out.
Yeah,
cryptids were part of the era back then. That was a huge thing. And indeed, that came out March 1933, in March, April, June. The sighting started not long after that.
Funny that. Also, it's worth pointing out for those who haven't seen that film, there is a giant Loch Ness style sea monster in it, which is exactly what the reports are like. A big humpbacked, sort of flippered, long-necked creature which rears out of the water in a way that a plesiosaur actually couldn't. Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought those up because I completely forgotten as it goes. Let's see, Anthony Bailey, what about you? You've seen a bunch of different things. You can find explanations for each individual bit of evidence, but what does your overview tell you of what's going on at Loch Ness?
Pretty much what 1 Minute Debunk said. If you go there wanting to see something, that's what you're going to see. Even if it's just a bunch of birds flying off in the distance or ducks fighting in the water, eels mating, all that. You're going to see what you want to see because that's what you want to see.
Sure. No, I think that's a reasonable conclusion. Like, for my part, what I think you're seeing is there have been enough slightly strange events because it's a loch, right? And it's a big lake, and going all the way back through time, it's got slightly sort of weird creatures in it. You've got seals, you've got big sturgeons, you've got big eels, you've got things which in and of themselves a long time ago were thought of as quite monstrous, you know. And then coupled to the fact that stories that old sort of get expanded and exaggerated somewhat over time, so they become a bit more miraculous, right? Then you add more layers. Now you've got the fact that there are certain interesting water currents going on, and that the surface of the water is quite flat, and if you lose the edges of it, you can lose scale quite easily. And then on top of that, you have the fact that there's now a history that's built up, and there are certain phenomena which can cause these apparent sightings, and people start to go, like, the whole thing for me is that you've got all of these tiny little elements which in and of themselves are fairly innocuous, but as time has gone on, they've added to a picture, and this bizarre story has grown essentially out of almost nothing. Tiny little hints and patches here and there, and the magic of the human imagination. Like any other report of monsters that we see, it's basically people who've had a bit of a great idea at some point and have sort of maybe been scared or surprised and have had an active imagination, have told a story that's more interesting. Other people want to see the same thing and they do the story as well. Now, every hoax that we've seen seems to be trying to sort of play into this as well. We've got a very good picture regarding this, actually. I forget what the name of the chap is, but it's a picture of a guy who's kneeling down in the water, and he's got what looks like a Nessie's hump just sticking out of the water next to him. Bobby, I'm wondering if you could try scrolling through the pictures a bit and seeing if you can find that one.
I know this one.
Right, he actually bought a movie prop for this, as I understand it. It's a carbon fiber movie prop which got from some bizarre film, and he intentionally took these. That was it. There you go. He used that to take these photos, and the reason the Loch Ness hunter community don't like him very much is because he admitted it was all a fake not that long later. And what's worse is he admitted that the reason he did the fake was it brings people to the lake. Okay? He said, I don't particularly like it when they bring scientific teams here to try and prove that the Loch Ness is there, because in reality they're going to sort of, it's bad for business, you know what I mean? He sees the lake as a good way to get an opportunity to get interested tourists along to take part in the fun. While I'm asking, I suppose, Port Punky, have you actually been to Loch Ness yourself? Have you been down that way?
Can I ask a question real fast?
Yeah.
Is this one of the photos in question right here, or is this after he admitted?
So if you go back one, oh god, the camera flipping is weird. Yeah. So that's the photo. The guy's called George Edwards. He took this photo.
Okay, that makes much more sense.
Look, a hump, and then if you go to the next photo,
play Jim.
That's the hump. But Jim, it's worse than you say. He got the hump from a documentary he worked on about the Loch Ness monster.
Oh my god, no!
It was a prop that they left over. He nabbed it and took a photo.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, nonsense.
That's enterprising. You've got to give it to the guy. It's one of my favorites, to be honest, because it's, if you're going to fake it, do a good job of it. That is the back of a sort of a Nessie, right? It's perfect for the task. Let's see, who haven't I spoken to about this already? I'm looking up the list. I think everyone's had a bit of a chat on it so far. Has anyone got any thoughts so far they think haven't been said? Now's the time to sort of speak out about it.
I just wanted to accent what you kind of touched on. This is all about human imagination and desire for the fantastic. We get tired of boring and mundane. We dream of outer space civilizations, creatures under the water, creatures that we just for some reason haven't found on land. It's part of human instinct, I think, to want to find what is improbable and fantastic. And as long as there's still any question or any wiggle room for these types of things to possibly be out there, people are going to say they saw them, either lying about it, or they're going to convince themselves that they saw it, or hell, maybe somebody will see it. But that's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely. Well said. Fair enough. Well, look, I think we've sort of pretty much covered the subject as much as we want to. I know that Port Punky could go on for hours and hours about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to Carissa Brock first and ask whether or not we've got any more comments or questions to read out.
Well, I did want to reiterate, Bobby had posted it in the chat, and I just want to let everybody else know, if you haven't seen in the chat, Your Pal Al is going to have a premiere at 9 p.m. Central U.S. time and 8 a.m. Greenwich time. So the link is
3
in
a.m.
the...
3 a.m.
Sorry, I can't read. No, you're okay. Thank you for correcting me, because that was very wrong. The link is in the chat if you want to head over there at that time and check him out.
Brilliant stuff. Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Now, any other more comments and questions you wanted to bring up? Because I was going to ask you what your thoughts are on the going so far. Complete silence. Can you hear
Sorry.
me?
Was that just?
That was for Carissa.
Oh, it's for Carissa. Sorry. Also,
You got any
Sorry,
thoughts?
no. It's just that there's so much going on with the Loch. When you have entire giant tree logs that can go against the surface, the surface waves, because it's riding the underwater waves. So there's so much that could be mistaken for a monster in any capacity, and with a lock that deep that is very difficult to see after 9 feet, you're going to get a lot of fear. And I have issues with being in a swimming pool because of all of the lovely sea monster lore and movies I watched as a kid. So to be in a loch where there's actually that kind of atmosphere that you see in movies, it's obviously going to create that level of fear and anxiety, and you're going to expect to see something. So it's just the reiteration of what you guys were saying.
Oh, no, I think you're right, though. Yeah, the blackness of the water is something that's very unique. This high peak content, as I forget which one of us said it, but there's only 9 or 10 feet of light, essentially, before the sun's blocked out entirely. That's a really creepy, scary environment, isn't it? You wouldn't really want to go swimming in a lake that's very cold, very deep, full of eels, and has
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, the eels especially.
Now, let's see. Tony Bailey, what about you? Have you got any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Well, pretty much what I've been saying. People see what they want to see. And, of course, Loch Ness is not the only place where some sort of water monster has been reported.
Right.
So they have no longer become original. Or no, the other ones aren't original. Loch Ness is original, the other ones aren't.
Okay.
Sorry.
Fair enough. Okay, man. Well, thank you very much. Hands of Apostate, how about you? Any final thoughts? I'm going to turn to Port Ponky last of all because he can take us out back. Before we do, I see him. He's thrashing away there. He's desperate to add, but we're going to Apostate first.
Yeah, no. Look, just cryptids are fun. You know, I know we're going to cover more cryptids on this very show in the future. It goes into that X-Files motto, I want to believe. And I think there's also a local culture element to some of these things. For instance, go north into northern Washington state here in the States and tell them that Bigfoot doesn't exist. Most of those people are going to say, yeah, no, he does. I saw him. My cousin saw him. So-and-so saw him. And sometimes science also doesn't help when we find actual things like living fossils. There's, a few fish that we thought were extinct for millions or hundreds of thousands of years that, some fisherman pulls up out of the sea. So I think Nessie's going to be around probably forever.
Absolutely. I think that's a reasonable point. Okay. Well, look, have I got to everyone on the list that I wanted to, apart from Pont Ponky? Have I missed anyone out? I think we're there, aren't we?
I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. In which case, Port Ponky, why don't you take it away?
I just got so pipped to the post there because I was going to be a big devil's avocado.
Oh, right. Sorry, mate.
There are living fossils. The coelacanth is a fish that was thought to have gone extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period until they found one in the 1930s. It's not the only one. There are weird things in the sea in abundance, and things that disappear from the fossil record and appear later. Is there anything in Loch Ness? Probably not. And that's, well, I'm probably going to get killed for saying that. It'll be kilted assassins creeping up on me as we speak. But the world's oceans are much vaster than just Loch Ness. So, yeah, the truth is out there.
Beautiful. Well, look, I think that's basically it from the lot of us. We've given you as many sort of facts and factoids as we could about this. I think there's no one here who's really convinced that Loch Ness could really potentially be a thing at all. But if you are interested in the subject, we're going to put some citations down in our descriptions over the course of the next sort of day, so that you can go and find out all these interesting stuff for yourself. I suppose that being said, thanks everyone very much for coming. Remember to hit like if you liked it, and sub if you haven't already. We're all very humbled and grateful for you coming and tuning in anyway. So thank you. We'll be back next time, same time next week, with more weird and wonderful stuff. Next week, we're going to have our first special guest, and the conspiracy is going to come on the show to help us wade through the murky world of secret societies like the Freemasons and the Illuminati. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are. And I've been Jim Bojo. We've been going critical. So goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from everyone else. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye, guys.